Hi. Roy and I moved to the patch on half an acre in the Dandenong Ranges about 14 years ago. One of our main aims was to grow lots of fruit and veggies. So we decided to develop the property using permaculture principles as much as possible, although it's certainly not a pure permaculture property. For example, we don't have chooks. And the emphasis was to be on water and energy conservation. And the reasons for this were, there were no mains on our street when we first arrived, so we had to rely on water tanks. It was a northwest facing block and sloping, so very hot in summer. And we were very concerned about the future impacts of climate change. There was already a 16% decrease in rainfall in our area over the last 30 years. So to start with, just to provide some context for looking at converting our swimming pool to a pond, I'm going to start with a video looking at use of permaculture on our property, which was made by our daughter Sarah as part of her course, because I think it's a rather delightful introduction. Then I'll take you through the steps in how we converted our chlorinated swimming pool to a natural pond. Not only is it a natural pond, but we can still swim in it, this being one of the major objectives of the project. So this is probably our major water conservation project to date, and it's more than doubled our water storage capacity. So let's have a look at Sarah's video. Thank you, Sarah. Permaculture stands for permanent agriculture. It's a system developed by two Australians, and the idea is to mimic natural ecosystems as much as possible and use nature sustainably and wisely to provide not just food but shelter and energy for ourselves. For example, here I grow food in an organic fashion without using fertilisers. I only use manures and compost that I make. The water is captured from rain, sort of large water tanks, and it's circulated around the garden. Energy is provided by solar panels on the roof and by wood we get from our lot. It's about half an acre, and we get a lot of dead wood falling. It's used for fire to keep us warm in winter. And water is a very big factor on the block, because not only are we capturing water from the roof of our house, we're using it inside the house and the garden, but also we have a pond, which is just from rainwater. We don't ever add water to it, and its level goes up and down naturally. And in the pond we grow fish, which we could eat. It's habitat for local frogs and tadpoles. We even have a lot of snails in there. And we grow food in floating boxes around them. We grow things like mint, taro, Vietnamese mint, lettuce, watercress. Watercress is full of vitamins. It's a fantastic crop, and you need very little to grow. And all of these things work together in the pond, like the fish bloom, and that fertilises the plants, and the plants oxygenate the water, which provides oxygen to the fish. So it's a really great system. And of course we sit by the pond to stay cool, and we even use it as a natural swimming pool. So on a very hot day I don't turn on any air conditioning, I just come down and dunk myself in the pond. The other feature of our property, which is very permaculture, is that all of our wastewater, including our black water from the toilet and the grey water from the kitchen, the bathroom and the laundry, they all go into a great big worm farm. And worms break down the material and make it suitable for use by plants, and then the water is circulated around the garden for growing plants. So it's almost a closed system, except of course we have the inputs are mainly the sun and the rain and the light, of course. So it's a great system. We use mulch a lot to reduce the water use, and mulch also breaks down, generates food for the plants. What I enjoy about gardening is the self-sufficiency aspect of it, where you feel like you're using what's available as much as possible, what is available in nature, and you're working with nature rather than against it. So anybody who's interested in growing their own food and providing their own energy and whatever should have a close look at permaculture. You get a lot of satisfaction out of doing it. no use of chemicals, pollution reduced to a minimum. It's a very, very satisfying system. Thanks, Sarah. So just recapping on some of the important aspects of water conservation from the video, you'd have noticed the water tanks and drip irrigation and the use of mulch. However, what was probably not quite so clear was that all the irrigation is gravity fed. Because our tanks higher up the hill from the veggie garden and the fruit trees, we don't need to pump the water around. So that's a great energy conservation. And also, note the worm farm processes all the wastewater from the house, and we're able to reuse that water to grow the fruit and veggies, even root crops. The only stipulation which the EPA makes is that you need to deliver the water in pipes that are buried 4 inches below the surface. So that's fantastic as well. So I guess the next step in our water conservation project was to look at what to do about the swimming pool. Because when we moved to the patch, one of the things we said we did not want was a swimming pool, because there are quite a lot of swimming pools in the area. But we were really attracted to the northwest aspect of the block, and it already had quite a few established fruit trees. We loved the house, we loved the area. So we decided to put up with a swimming pool. And one of the first things I did was look up how to fill in a pool, or look up people who would fill in your pool, but they wanted $6,000. So then I talked to Pete the Permie, and he said, oh, you can't do that. He said, it's a fantastic water storage. If you do nothing else, you can use it for water storage. Anyway, it took us a long time to get around to doing anything about it. So for a while, it was a chlorinated swimming pool. And we finally got around to deciding to change it to a natural pond. These were the objectives we came up with. We said, well, we have to provide habitat for wildlife. We were very hopeful that we'd at least attract frogs and tadpoles. And you'll see later that we attracted other things as well, which we didn't quite think of. We also wanted to make sure that we could still swim in it. You'll see a lot of examples in Ku-ring-gai Chase in Sydney region where they've converted unused swimming pools to ponds, but I haven't seen one yet where the people still swim in it. So ours, it was to be unique in that we could swim in it still. Also, we wanted to, of course, increase our water supply, and the pool holds 55,000 litres when it's full, which more than doubles our water supply. So that's fantastic. And of course, being a permaculture property, we wanted to grow food. And we wanted to do all of these things with no smell or mozzies. So this is what we started with. This is what the swimming pool looked like 4 years ago. And it's quite a big move to start, because what you have to do is you have to pluck up your courage to go and turn off the swimming pool pump and filter. And of course, you know that everything is probably going to turn green, because we've all seen those neglected swimming pools that are green and full of mozzies. So it's a bit frightening. But anyway, we managed to do it. And if you've got a chlorinated swimming pool, you'd think that was a disadvantage. I mean, we were hoping it would at least be a saltwater pool. But if you have a saltwater pool, you have to actually remove all of the water, because you can't grow plants and fish in salt water. Well, not the plants we wanted to grow anyway. But if you have a chlorinated pool, all you have to do is turn off the pump and stop adding chlorine, and in 2 to 3 weeks, it's ready to start planting. And the way you can tell that is when you see mozzie larvae, or mozzie wrigglers in the pool. So we turned off the pump, and we actually drained out about 1/3 of the water. We didn't have to do that, but we just thought about the chemicals that had gone into it over the years, and we thought, well, maybe we'll drain out the water. And we've just let the rainfall naturally top it back up. And it's completely full at the moment. And it didn't take that long to fill it back up. So that's where we started. So when you create a pond, you have to be aware of the fact that a pond is a bit different from a swimming pool. First of all, it has many levels. So you need to provide different levels. Our pool has a deep end, which is over 2 metres. The shallow end is 1.8 metres. So there's not a lot of variation there. We do, however, have a shelf in one area and some steps, so that helps. But this is the way, this is the guides for planting up ponds that pond experts come up with. So zone 1 is where you put plants around the edge, which are basically moisture loving. And then zone 2, which is like maybe the top step in our pond, we'll start calling it a pond now, shall we, is where you put what are called marginal or bog plants. These are plants that are very happy for their roots to be inundated all the time. And then zone 3 is for submerged plants, which grow mainly underwater. Those are things like milfoil, eelgrass. We've got milfoil and eelgrass in our pond. And then in the deepest area, you grow plants that are totally submerged and that live on the bottom. And in this case, we have water ribbons, which is probably our main plant. We've also added Iliacaris. I'm not sure what its common name is. And Roy even found some papyrus growing in a creek up the road. It's a weed there, I'm pretty sure. So he removed a couple of plants from there. So we've got papyrus as well. And then finally they've got zone 5, which is for floating plants, and that could be just watercress floating around by itself, water lettuce. There's a thing called a foxtail that floats around. So yeah, and we found that a lot of things will take off and just break off from wherever we planted them and float quite happily. So floaters are not difficult to come by. So then, this is what the pond started to look like. You can see already we've lost the lovely aqua colour from the chlorinated swimming pool, and the pool's starting to go a slightly different colour. Roy's here planting up these planters to go around the edge of the pond in zone 1, and this in here he's going to plant, I think, probably Alodia or maybe eelgrass, which will go on one of the steps in the pond. Getting a little later, maybe we're up to, we started in May, maybe we're up to late June here. The pond's going even greener. Now, one of the ways we provided extra levels, you can see here we've got 3 steps there, which is very good. That's terrific for providing levels. But we started to put in furniture, which we got from hard rubbish collections off nature strips, or we even had to buy we bought a couple of glass-topped tables off Gumtree. Glass-top tables are fantastic because you can't really see them. And probably you've all seen people with their outdoor settings with the glass-top table and the fabric-covered chairs. Well, what happens is the fabric gives out and people don't know what to do with their tables, so they're very happy to get rid of them. And in this case here, that's a child's clam, which is used for a sandpit or a little paddling pool, and it's sitting on, you can't see it, but it's sitting on a kid's table that we also got off the nature strip. And in that we grow milfoil. And the interesting thing is that the milfoil now covers an area that's much bigger, like that. And I keep wondering if the clam is going to tip off. But so far, so good. So that's how we created the different levels. Some of the plants that you might see, these are called water lettuce. You can't actually eat these ones, although we do have edible lettuce as well. You can start with one plant and they put out little babies, and by the end of the season you might have 20 water lettuce floating there. So they're a fantastically economical plant. And then of course you have to have water lilies. And again, they're pretty economical. We started off with 2 water lilies, and you can divide them. And we've now got about 7 or 8, I think. Next problem we turned our attention to was the level in water variation, because you've got evaporation and you've got rainfall, and so this means that the pond level is going up and down, and we thought, gee, how are the plants going to cope with that? I guess they do in a natural environment, don't they? So but we thought we should give nature a bit of a helping hand. So I looked up the statistics for evaporation and rainfall in our area, and I discovered that between April and September, on average, we could expect the level in the pond to rise by about 45 centimetres. But on the other hand, between October and March, it would go down about 25 centimetres. So overall, in a year, you can expect a net gain of about 20 centimetres. And that, of course, is the water that I use to water the garden. Or I might even take more if things get really bad and the droughts get worse. So we came up with the idea of using poly boxes
for part of the vegetation that we wanted to grow, because they obviously bob up and down as the water level changes. And the other thing we wanted to do with the polyboxes was to grow plants around the edge and hide this ugly edge, because once the water goes down, it doesn't look quite so attractive. So Roy painted them up into this nice brick reedy colour. And we also used them initially to cut down the light, because the reason this algae is forming here is because of all the sunlight that's coming on the pool, and there's not enough plants to take up the oxygen, and there's not enough bacteria there to break down the algae. So when you first start off, you get a lot of algae, and you can still get algae quite. I mean, most years you get a bit of a flush of algae, especially in when the first warm days come in. Now the next major step in our project was to go down to our local supplier. We found that there was a marvellous wholesale supplier of water plants, aquatic plants. They have property about 40 acres, about 10k away from us. And they were very happy for us to come down and buy some plants and to talk to them about the pond and what we should do. And we said we were very concerned about the fact that it was very green. And the other thing was, we said we wanted to swim in it. And they said, oh, if you want to swim in your pond, that's quite different from other people. They said, what you really should be doing is providing aeration. And we said, oh, but we don't want to use energy. And they said, oh, we've got an aerator that's very energy efficient. And they said, your other alternative, if you want to swim in the pond, is they said you'll probably have to wait 2 to 3 years for the water to clear, and you'll need to cover 50% of the surface with plants to keep the algae down. And I said, gee, well, if 50% is covered in plants, I'm not going to be swimming. So he said, well, your alternative is to put the aerator in. So we hummed and hawed, and eventually we agreed. And I have to say, it was a fantastic step. It speeded the process up by, 2 years, I'd say, because we really quickly the pond started to clear. So this next step shows us loading in the aerator, and there's Roy over there. There's a tiny little motor that sits over there, and then two hoses come across here, and you can place the 2 outlets in different positions in the pond. So we've got one down this end, which is the very deep end, and one up in the shallow end. A lot of plants don't like a lot of turbulence, so you can protect them by keeping the aerators at either end, and the water lilies are more in the centre. They don't like a lot of turbulence. And this is the day we launched. We're trying to launch the aerator. Our daughter's helping. Oh, there's an engine noise. That's not making the right pump noise. Oh, whoosh. What's happening? We should see bubbles any minute. Can anybody see bubbles? It's too... Oh, bubbles! It worked! Congratulations, Roy. Well done. There's the aeration. We can go fish now. We can eat fish. Fantastic. Full flow going through that way. Eh? Full flow going through that way. Oh, right. God, it's a lot of water, isn't it? A lot of air. Oh, that's going to kill the water lilies. I can tell you that's going to kill the water lilies. Yeah. That's not for water lilies. So we'll back off a bit. So that was a very exciting day. And we did not kill the water lilies, because you can move them around, and you can also adjust how much flow is coming out each of the aerators. So there's a lot more energy coming out in this deep end down here than there is in the other end where the water lilies are growing. So we said, wow, well, we've got aeration. We've worked out how to live with the pond level variation. What's the next step? Well, we'd already started putting in plants by now. So we turned our attention to fish. And fish are a fantastic asset in the pond. I mean, they eliminate into the water, and then bacteria, which these bacteria form naturally on all the surfaces in the pond. Ideally, if you could cover the bottom in pebbles, and that would create even more surfaces for the bacteria to form on. We haven't done that yet, because we're still thinking in the back of our mind, we'd like to be able to tell the people, if we ever sell it, that they could of course reverse it back and change it back to a swimming pool if they so wish. I can't imagine they'd want to do that when they see how beautiful it is. Anyway, there are bacteria that form naturally, and they convert the ammonia from the fish and organic decay from the plants. Plants die down and decay, and they convert it to materials that eventually are nitrates, which are used by the plants as food. So you get this fantastic cycle going. And of course there's oxygen as well. The plants are oxygenating the pond, which is also good for the fish. So that's how the nitrogen cycle works. And then the next thing to look at was which fish shall we put in. And we wanted to put native fish if possible. No koya for us. We've heard all these stories about people putting in the goldfish and how they then have to cover the ponds in netting to stop the kookaburras. So we went for small native fish, and these are Murray River rainbow. They're a fantastic little fish. They're an omnivore, so they eat the algae and they eat mosquito larvae and anything else that happens to come their way. We've even seen a fish jumping a few inches out of the water and grabbing a mosquito. So they come from the Murray River, and we do wonder if they might be the only ones left, because the Murray's certainly in dire straits, and maybe we'll have to help out there one day. So the other fish, they grow only to about 4 to 5 inches, like 10 centimetres, is that right? Yep, 10 centimetres. And they live for about 5 to 6 years. The other good thing about them is they tolerate really low temperatures, so they'll still keep breeding until the water drops to 15 degrees. After that, then they go into hibernation for the winter. The other fish is the southern pygmy perch. It looks like a big fish there, but again, it's only a small fish, 4 to 6 inches. They grow to 4 to 6 inches. It's also only lives for a few years, 4 to 5 years maybe, also tolerates cold temperatures. The interesting thing about this fish is it's a carnivore, so it doesn't eat algae as far as I know. And I read recently that it can be cannibalistic, and we are very suspicious about this fish because we had started off the first year with thousands of fish, and then the next year hundreds, and then now we're down to about 30. So we're not quite sure what's going on. But the pond looks fantastic, by the way. It's totally clear and amazing. And maybe we've just produced finally a balanced pond ecosystem. I'm not sure. Anyway, here's Roy mucking around on the edge of the pond. And this is November now. So this is 6 months later from when we started. You can see the bubbles over here there's an aerator outlet nearby. There's a log there that Roy insisted on putting in the water. Water lilies are growing well. Here's some sedges, local sedges. This is a lovely plant called pickerel, which I'll show you closer up later. And here are our floating boxes. And this little stack of stones, as you'd probably guess, or rocks, is supposed to be the way out for the tree frogs, which were the first frogs that came to the pond. But one day we were sitting there watching, and you know, these little creatures have got suckers on the end of their feet that help them climb up trees, and lo and behold, they can climb straight up the side of the pond, over the ceramic tiles, under the brick lip and out. So we didn't really need that. However, later on pobblebonks came, and pobblebonks are not so smart. They have much more difficulty getting in and out of ponds, so they would take advantage of the pile of rocks. There's another view just looking at the boxes and how they're hiding in the side of the pond. This plant here is a marshwort. It grows, it's very widespread, grows in Sydney naturally, and down here you'll see that in a lot of natural ponds around here. And it spreads really easily, probably spread more than we want to eventually. Under here you can also see some of the furniture that's gone in. There's a glass table there which you can't see, but these trays are sitting on the table. And there's milk crates over here which you can't see, upended milk crates. Right, so next we're going to look at some of the creatures that inhabited the pond. So we put in the 2 types of fish, but of course nature has provided others. And these photos that follow are photos taken by Roy. He loves macro photography and he's very patient, and he's put together a lovely set of photos. So let's have a look at what we've got here. Aren't these cute? They're so agile. That's the tree frog, and that sedge that it's climbing on, it's less than 1 inch wide. Amazing. Look at those two. They're so cute. This looks like a family of frogs straddled over a piece of netting that was in there. And this is one of Roy's favourites, the mayfly. Beautiful creature. And wait till you see these. Even better, the dragonfly. Loves the water lilies, so perfect pose and perfect for macro photography. This one's even more stunning. Roy managed to capture 2 dragonflies. Wow, how fantastic is that? This one's a little bit more of a sad story. So I mentioned before that we suspect that the southern pygmy perch is a cannibal. Cannibal. I was getting mixed up with carnivore and cannibal. Well, what have we got here? This shape tells me this is a tadpole. This is a poor tadpole. I mean, it's in. Hopefully it wasn't killed by these tadpoles. I'm sure it wasn't, but they certainly taken the opportunity to devour it. So I wasn't absolutely sure that tadpoles were carnivores, but they obviously are. So they're omnivores, because one great thing about tadpoles is they also eat algae. And when we had a lot of tadpoles, you could look down the edge of the pond and there'd be little wisps of algae growing all over it, and the tadpoles will all be lined up like pigs at the trough eating the algae. So next we turned our attention to food, well, of the green kind. So we tried growing lettuce in boxes. Whoops, I've lost my lettuce in boxes. Oh, sorry, that was the pickerel. I meant to show you what the pickerel looks like. It's a fantastic plant. It's not native or not local. We do try to get by with mostly local and native plants, but you can't pass up water lilies, and pickerels are fantastic as well. They have these lovely blue spikes and they flower for like 4 or 5 months, so they're a great plant to have. So then we turned our attention to food, and these are boxes of cos lettuce, which did pretty well, but the thing that does the best is the watercress. It's absolutely fantastic, and it'll grow out of the box and right across the pond if you want it to. The other things we've tried, we've got water celery, water spinach, taro. We've got some fantastic taro plants growing. We haven't eaten it yet because fortunately we grow potatoes on the block and we're not that starving, but I guess, you never know. With climate change, one day we might be eating taro as well. That's just a close-up of the lettuce from a different angle. Oh, it's interesting to note these little floating plants here. You can buy these little floating circles, which have got holes in the middle, from our local nursery for $18 each. They're just plastic and green. So Roy came up with the brilliant idea of cutting them out of polystyrene box lids, painting them up, and we just dropped pot plants in there and they float around. So it's another way of keeping the light down, because remember we've got to cover, our rule is we need to cover at least 30% of the surface area with plants to keep the algae to a reasonable level. Working with the aerator together, that provides a good balance in the pond, and it makes a lovely area for swimming. Guess who? I went down to pick some lettuce for lunch one day. This is a little tree frog nestled amongst the cos lettuce. Cheeky, isn't he? So this is what the pond looked like less than 1 year after we started. So we started in May 2016. This is February 2017. So it's looking pretty fantastic, isn't it? You can see the water levels quite a way down. We've just been through summer. Pickerels have expanded. These plants are growing very well around here. We've made a circle down there to contain the plants in rings, because when the wind blows they tend to charge all over the place, and if you're not careful they knock the flowers off the water lilies. Here's Roy's log still, which we've had to remove finally because I was nearly poking my eye at him. So it's going very well. This is one of my absolute favourite shots just because of all the beautiful reflections. So this is just to prove that I do swim in it. Although you saw that in the video anyway, didn't you? And that was when the log was in. It did look terrific, I must admit. But you can see how much area these plants are already occupying. And this is only March 2017, so not even a year after we started. So very exciting. Now, this comes to the more interesting part of the story. So we had fish, we've got our frogs, which we're very happy with. And then one day we're sitting having a cuppa with some friends on the other side of the pond, where we spend a lot of time, probably in nearly every breakfast, lunchtime, afternoon tea, and often dinner. And who should arrive but this exquisite looking white-faced heron. Oh, we were so excited. Wow, such a delicate creature. But then, okay, so it stood there for a while, and then it started to show a bit of interest in its surrounds, and it walked along and started picking things out of the boxes of food. And then it walked on the boxes, and then it went over the other side of the pond and started picking at things in the milfoil. And we thought, wonder what it eats. So went inside and looked it up, and oh, dearie me, it likes frogs, it likes tadpoles, fish, snails. We've got a lot of snails in the pond, which also feed on algae and help keep the algae down. We thought, not so sure if we should be encouraging the heron. Anyway, oh gosh, you'll never guess what. A few weeks later, this little beastie arrived. It's a little pied cormorant. Now they're even worse than the heron because they, of course, all they do is sit on the edge of the pond and then dive. You can't even chase them away very easily. And of course they feed on fish. And I think they've probably got a voracious appetite for fish. Even though this is the little pied cormorant, it's quite a big creature. So we're starting to pull our hair out and think, wow, are we just going to become a feeding area for the local wildlife? And then guess what arrived next? 2 beautiful wood ducks came. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought of sharing your swimming pool with ducks, but it's not really a very good prospect. And you can see what the duck's eating there. The duck's gone straight for the water lilies. I looked it up, sure enough, ducks like water lilies, they love lettuce. They tipped one of my boxes of lettuce over. And the ducks really made themselves at home. Very difficult to budge them. And look at this one. It's managed to climb out of the water, up on the side of the poly box, and sitting in my watercress, and probably pooing and weeing all over it. Oh boy. So what are we going to do? So I was a bit upset because I'm sure you all know the mess that ducks make around ponds with their poo and stuff. It's not good, and they would definitely be fouling our water because even though it's not a tiny pond, it's certainly not like a dam or something like that, which is much more of a natural habitat for ducks. So we asked around, and fortunately someone up the road had a similar problem in their swimming pool, not in their pond. I think it was a saltwater pool. And they'd come up with the idea of stringing a few bits of fishing line around the place at random intervals and at random heights. So this is what we tried. And I have to say it does spoil the view of the pond a bit. But, it seemed to work pretty well. Well, it's worked with the herons and the ducks. The heron came one day and sat on this umbrella. I saw it, and it looked and looked and looked for ages, and then it flew away. The ducks came and one got its foot caught, and they haven't been back again. However, when we were away recently for 3 weeks, we had someone house sitting for us, and they reported the cormorant came still. So I think that might be why our fish supply is down. However, there are ways. First of all, the cormorant's fairly slow compared with our fish. The fish are very fast swimmers. And underneath here, there are a lot of milk crates. And I've turned all the milk crates around so that the open side is facing down. So if the fish are really smart, they could go into the milk crates and hide from the cormorant. So we're just hoping that that's what they'll do. So I'll leave you with, here's a little video of me swimming. And this is just taken the other day. So look how high the water is. You can't see there, but the water's incredibly clear. Like we can see the bottom and the deepest end, and we can see the milk crates. We can't see the glass tables because they're fantastic. So it's fantastic habitat, I think you'd agree, for wildlife. We've got the natural native fish that we introduced ourselves, but we've got the tree frog. We do have pobblebonks. We didn't have a recording of that, sorry, but we have pobblebonks visit regularly. And we have the other wildlife, which we're trying to discourage. And of course, it has turned out to be a marvellous swimming pool. The other day I did 32 lengths, because I can't go to the swimming pool and I can't go to the beach. So, and I am a mad swimmer. And if we're growing food in it, it's a fantastic water supply. I've siphoned the water out at the moment. I've got a piece of hose in there, and I just drain the water down to the fruit trees and put it into another hose. Long term, we might buy a submersible pump and pump the water out, but at the moment we're just using gravity. And things that we didn't put on our list that we needed to supply is cooling. We've put in AC about 2 years ago in one room, but we've only had it on twice. Once because visitors came and wanted it on. And if we get too hot, we just duck down and have a swim. I've been known to go down at 11:30 at night and have a swim before I go to bed. It's fantastic. The other thing, of course, it's a thing of great beauty and peace. And we spend a lot of time sitting by the pond, having discussions, reading books, just looking. It's just fantastic. So those were added advantages, and all with no smells. The water never smells, and the mozzie population hasn't increased. We still get a few mozzies because of all the damp areas around and the water tanks and things probably. So I think you'll agree it's been a fantastic success. And I would urge anybody out there with a chlorinated swimming pool who doesn't use it that much, or whose kids have left home, or who would rather have a natural swimming pool, to race out now and turn off your filter system and your pump. In 2 to 3 weeks, you can start developing your pond. We'd be very happy to help anybody. It's Roy and Jenny from the Patch. We'll provide our email details, and you can look us up and you can come and visit, and we can even give you a few free plants to start off with. Thank you very much.